Hello everyone, Stormer1 here. Today we'll be checking out my official winter 2022 through 23 forecast. We'll be checking out some factors, some model guidance, the CPC forecast, and also, of course, my forecast as well. Let's not waste any more time. I'm going to get started by looking at the current sea surface temperature anomalies. And there are a few things going on. Number one, we do have a weak to moderate La Nina in the equatorial Pacific. We also have um, quite a bit of above normal anomalies across really the northern Pacific, but there's also this cold pool that has developed up in the parts of the Gulf of Alaska, which is pretty interesting. That may be partially due to the pattern that we had back in early November, which we had an active subtropical jet stream in the parts of the northwest. Northwestern U.S. was brought in a decent amount of rain. It's also helped cool down sea surface temperatures up there. But right now, the time of making this video, we're currently experiencing a very strong, if I'm correct, it's a negative EPO or positive. I can't remember which one it is, um, but it has led to a massive ridge over parts of Alaska, western BC, and it's going to lead to a massive trough across really for most of the country, seeing below normal temperatures out there as well. And then again, with this ridge here building out here, that's going to help kind of warm up some of these sea surface temperature anomalies out here, which if you do look at sea surface temperature anomalies in the past 7 days or the changes, you can see there's definitely an indication that those sea surface temperature anomalies are beginning to warm up in some of those areas, including that colder pocket that's in the Gulf of Alaska. If that trend were to continue, we could see a positive PDO pattern, which can favor more ridging in parts of the northern Pacific, and that can get into parts of western BC, even into parts of western US as well. Another area to monitor will be in the Atlantic Ocean. We actually got a lot of warmth out there. Hurricane season is almost over, so I'm not really expecting too many changes when it comes to sea surface temperature anomalies. Maybe the only exception be along the coastlines where we do see that big dip in the jet stream over here in the eastern U.S. Other than that, I think some of these very warm sea surface temperature anomalies are going to continue to maintain probably in the next couple weeks. And a couple good things with this. Number one, any low pressure system that goes over these very warm sea surface temperatures can strengthen. Number two, you got a good moisture supply. But one of the bad things would be that with these above normal sea surface temperature anomalies, that could lead to above freezing temperatures on the East Coast, which would decrease probabilities for some good winter storms. You can still see them, but with so many sea surface temperature anomalies like this, I think it would be way too warm um, to see snow, even along the east coastline, depending on which wind direction it would be. If a low were to track a little bit further inland, a lot of this warm air can definitely get pulled into parts of the northeast as well with some of the setups as well. Another thing would be that a little ridge could also try to develop within that very warm pocket as well. So that'd be another thing to watch for. Really, all I would really hope for is some of those sea surface temperature anomalies kind of move northward a little closer to Greenland. That can help lead to more of a negative NEO pattern, which a couple models are trying to hit that as well, which we'll take a look what an NAO is here in a little bit. But let's focus a little bit more on the ENSO. And really, yeah, we're still in a La Nina, and we're truly making a run for La Nina for a third winter in a row. That's only happened twice in recorded history. The latest one happened in the late 90s into 2001. That was a triple dip La Nina. And before that, you have to go back to the 1970s as well. So we're in the past 100 years, it's only happened twice, and we're making it a run for it to happen a third time. So yeah, this is pretty uncommon to see, and it's also pretty rare, in other words. Let's check out the forecast for La Nina from the CPC, and you can see here they got pretty good probabilities running through the winter 70-80% chance. So we're at least expecting La Nina to continue through most of the winter. However, things do begin to change as we do get closer to spring. You can see here by meteorological spring, neutral phase is forecasted to take over by that point, which they're giving it about 70% chance for a neutral phase, which, keep in mind, La Nina does typically bring more active weather than normal. Neutral phase, not so much. It can still bring some active weather, but not nearly as much as a La Nina pattern. So you can probably expect things to calm down a little bit as you get closer to the spring time frame. So I do think things will calm down a little bit, at least as we get into February as well. But at least for December and January wise, I think the weather is going to stay pretty active. Here's a model forecast for the Enzo, and you can see here where I'm highlighting that line there. That's winter. And you can see our models do expect La Nina to continue through the winter months. Now, I will mention something here. Back in October, models were showing it going in just about a neutral phase. This is basically the same thing that showed this time last year. And you know what happened last year? La Nina continued through the spring and even through the summer. Could that happen again? It's possible, but I do have some of my doubts because we are getting into the warmer period of the solar minimum, so I do expect La Nina to subside maybe as early as the next spring. Here's the CFS V2, and it's pretty much showing the same thing, showing La Nina continuing through winter. What does a typical La Nina pattern look like? And of course, not every winter is the same, and this is kind of based off an average. You can see our polar jet stream. You do get this little ridge that can try to build across parts of the northern Pacific, which does lead to a little dip in the jet stream over parts of the central and even the parts of the eastern U.S. You get wetter normal conditions in the northwest. Another area will be in the Tennessee Valley and the Ohio Valley, and also colder normal anomalies across parts of the northern plains. It's also drier and warmer across the south as well. And that's pretty much, your typical La Nina pattern. I don't think we're going to see a typical La Nina pattern this upcoming winter. Let's talk about some teleconnections. The Pacific North Atlantic Oscillation, or I'm sorry, the Pacific North American Oscillation. And you can see for a positive PNA, you get a ridge that builds across the western U.S. and up into parts of Canada. That could be partially due to warmer sea surface temperatures, which, as we look back earlier in the video, some of those sea surface temperature anomalies are beginning to trend a little bit warmer, which can help influence a little bit more of a positive PNA pattern. With a negative PNA, it's the opposite. You get colder normal and wetter normal conditions in the western U.S., and it makes the eastern U.S. warmer and drier. Let's talk about the NAO. And the NAO is located up towards Greenland in eastern Canada. And you can see here with a typical negative NAO, you get a big dip in the jet stream in the eastern U.S. Meanwhile, over Greenland, you get some blocking or a ridge of high pressure. With a positive NAO, it's the opposite. You get troughing up across parts of eastern Canada into parts of Greenland that leads to ridging across the eastern U.S. and makes things generally warmer and also a little bit drier than normal as well. And some models do hint on the potential for a negative NAO as well, so that'd be another thing to really watch for, especially if the European model does try to show that, which it is trying to show something like that. So that'd be something else to watch for. The Arctic Oscillation, and I think this is going to be one of the bigger factors this upcoming winter. In the Arctic Oscillation, it's really generally located pretty much over the northern hemisphere. But you can see during a positive phase here, the polar vortex overall is stronger. It helps keep the colder air a little closer to the North Pole. It also prevents from parts of the polar vortex from leaking a little bit farther south. With a negative phase, it's a little bit different. The polar vortex weakens and it makes the jet stream much more wavy. And that's where you can see big dips down the parts of the United States as well. And part of the factor from the Arctic Oscillation could be help influenced by the Hunga Tonga volcanic eruption, which, if you don't know where Hunga Tonga volcano is, that is in the southwestern part of the Pacific, and it did erupt. You got to go all the way back to January. That's when this thing here erupted, and this was an underwater volcano, and it did release a massive amount of water vapor way up to the stratosphere, which in the short term it led to a stratospheric cooling event across the southern hemisphere. Meanwhile, in the northern hemisphere, it leads to stratospheric warming. And when you get stratospheric warming, it weakens to polar vortex, and that can influence to more of a negative NAO. So you kind of see here how the Hunga Tonga volcanic eruption and the Arctic oscillation kind of relate for each other. With stratospheric warming, it can also lead to a decent amount of blocking across parts of the North Pole, even around Greenland, and even possibly, around Alaska as well. And that can help push all that cold air a little bit farther south. So the Hunga Tonga volcanic eruption can really affect this upcoming winter as well. This effect can also last for several years as well. The last time we see something like this, you have to go back to the early to mid 1990s, and really during that time period, we've seen some big winters in the United States, and that includes the storm of Citrus. It's either in 1994 or 1995, but we got to see significant severe weather in parts of Florida. We also got to see a big blizzard that brought record-breaking snow for parts of Deep South, which include parts of Alabama, all the way up into parts of the Northeast. Could that happen again? It's a possibility, but I cannot necessarily say if it's going to happen again or not. But it's been a very long time since we've seen kind of something like that. Okay, let's talk about some weather model guys. Now, I'm not going to show you guys the temperatures because, well, the models are just warm bias and you really don't get to see the real picture. But I will show you guys the precipitation anomalies. And what this model is the NMME. It's basically an ensemble mean of all the long range models into one graphic. So here you go. And really, when you look by precipitation anomalies, you can kind of tell where your ridge of high pressure could be located in your jet stream. Let's start off with where your ridge of high pressure could be located. And underneath a ridge of high pressure, that's where dry air is placed, which you can see here. There's some below normal anomalies out here. You got some below normal anomalies up towards the Gulf of Alaska, which could indicate some merging up there. We also got more below normal anomalies across parts of the south. That even goes across parts of the Gulf of Mexico, through Mexico, even the parts in the eastern Pacific, which can act as a little couple places of ridges of high pressure out here as well. So really across the south, it could generally be a little bit warmer and also a little bit drier than normal. There's also a little bit of a gap here in between some of these below normal anomalies out here, and I think that could be an indication where your Pineapple Express or your subtropical jet stream could be a little bit more active in some of these areas. That can help lead to some pretty good storm systems to enter into the northwestern U.S. as well. Where could your jet stream be placed? At least your polar jet stream. Well, if you follow the above normal anomalies here, you can kind of get an idea where your average placement for your polar jet stream could be located, which you can see here with the arrows I just put in on this map here. There's a little bit of a dip in the jet stream over parts of the central and eastern U.S. So there's a little bit of a colder signal out here. We've got an area of above normal anomalies across parts of the Northwest and even the parts of Montana, Wyoming. It drops off a little bit as we get into the plains. That may be partially due to the drought, which anytime you got drought conditions, temperatures can move around or get influenced pretty easily. Temperatures can easily rise, but it can also cool down. That's one thing. Another thing would be that drought conditions typically hold a lot of dry air, and dry air and snow don't really go very well together. Doesn't take much dry air to really mess up a winter storm setup. So that may be partially due to why the below normal anomalies are getting up into parts of the central plains as well. So some of you guys may not get a whole lot of luck out there, but I still kind of roll out a potential for a couple of good storm systems through there as well. Above normal anomalies do begin to show up again from the Ohio Valley up into parts of the Northeast, which could be an indication where we could see some pretty good winter storms up there as well. So you got to get an idea here that really, for an ensemble mean standpoint here, a colder, snowier winter can be favored for parts of the eastern U.S. Here's a month by month. You can see here for the month of December, not a whole lot that's going on here. Now, there is an area of below average sea surface, or not sea surface, precipitation almost across the south. Unfortunately, this could be an indication of the lack of your subtropical jet stream moving across Mexico and the parts of the southeast, which in that case there, that will limit the potential for some massive storm systems for the eastern U.S. or big nor'easters. In order to get some of those historic big winter systems, you want the subtropical jet stream and the polar jet stream to kind of merge. And in some cases, you get a piece of energy up here and a piece of energy from the subtropical jet stream, and when those two pieces of energy phases together, you get a big winter storm. Now, I'm not saying that's not going to happen this winter, but it may not be a very common thing. We can still cannot roll out a couple of those type of scenarios throughout parts of the winter as well, but that's definitely something to really note. But as we do get into January, things do begin to change. So those drier normal anomalies do begin to back off. It's now more focused really along the coastline. But you also notice here, above normal anomalies really begin to show up across the Great Lakes, Northeast, and the Ohio Valley, which could be an indication for some pretty good storm systems in some of those areas in there. February, it's a little bit similar. Some of those anomalies do begin to back off just a little bit, but really overall it shows kind of more of a typical La Nina pattern, which personally, in my opinion, I don't think we're going to see a typical La Nina pattern here. In reality here, I think the trough is going to be a little bit deeper in the parts of the central and eastern U.S., which will help push some of these above normal anomalies, I think, a little bit farther to the south as well. All right, let's check out the CPC forecast, which they just released yesterday. They trend just a little bit warmer, and honestly, in my opinion, I disagree with the warmer trend. And we all know that the CPC can be warm biased. I mean, honestly, really for the past two winters, they've been a little bit too warm. So you could probably take this forecast as a little bit of grain of salt. But I think this is also partially due to whether looking into more of a La Nina influence pattern, which in my opinion, like I said a couple times in this video, I'm not really seeing a typical La Nina pattern. Here's precipitation. You can see here above normal anomalies across the Great Lakes, Ohio Valley, which seems like they expanded that quite a bit in their latest update here. This is also probably going to be their final update, by the way. Even some above normal anomalies up to parts of the Northwest. And of course, across the South, it's also pretty dry. All right. The thing you guys have been waiting for, my winter forecast. And I'm going on a little bit more conservative approach. And there's nothing really wrong about going conservative, but you can still get the idea. And we're also doing a little bit differently this year. Usually I would say, normal or average or slightly below average or slightly above normal. We're actually going to put in some numbers this year. And you can see here in the light blue shade, 1 to 3 degrees below normal. That I would consider slightly below average temperatures, which you can see there. That covers a decent chunk of the central and eastern U.S. Areas in the yellow, 1 to 3 degrees above normal, slightly above normal temperatures. I think looks to be a pretty good bet across parts of the south and even for parts of the western U.S. In the northwest, it's kind of a wild card. I think we're going to see a lot of ups and downs when it comes to temperatures. I think in some setups, we're going to see a lot of ridging out there, which can lead to above normal temperatures. But I think in other setups, in certain situations, if the PDO or the PNA do try to flip a little bit, you can see that subtropical jet stream bring in some of those cooler than normal anomalies across parts of the northwestern U.S. as well. So I think there's going to be lots of ups and downs in the northwest. But you can clearly see here across the central and east U.S., it's likely to be more of a colder than normal winter. And if you were to compare to my last forecast, this is certainly colder compared to my last forecast here. And really, what I said, for this entire video here, I'm not really seeing much of a way of a warmer winter for the eastern U.S. Really, only thing that could lead to a warmer winter is those above normal sea surface temperature anomalies, and that's really about it. And really, that could just be a little thing. All right, let's move on to precipitation forecast. Then again, we got some numbers on the board. Areas are not in shaded in anything, 100%. Or you could say your typical normal, precipitation average. Areas in the light green, we got two areas. We got one area over parts of the Northern Rockies and the parts of Montana, Wyoming, and the Western Dakotas. That's 125% of your average, or slightly above average. We also got a secondary area really from parts of Texarkana, the Ozarks, for the Tennessee Valley, Ohio Valley, Mid-Atlantic, into the Northeast. I think that's where we could definitely see a pretty active storm track over those areas as well. We also got two different areas of slightly below average precipitation, or that's 75% of your average. You can see it covers a decent chunk of the western U.S. And you can see it covers a lot of your desert-like areas out there. It also extends down to parts of the Central Plains. It also kind of extends up through parts of the Midwest and the Central Plains. And I know it does look pretty odd, and let me explain why. And I already kind of explained it earlier. With the current drought conditions, with drought, it holds dry air. And as we know of, snow and dry air don't go together. So it can mess up some of your setups. And that can also decrease probabilities for heavy rainfall events. And that can easily get extended in the Midwest. Now, in the Midwest, we're not really experiencing a big drought up there at the moment, but I'm just not really seeing a favorable storm track for a lot of rain or snow in those areas. Maybe you have to wait for that really until spring or late winter by that point to get some action. But really, at the moment here, I think it's going to be a slow start precipitation wise for a decent chunk of the Midwest. We also got another slight below average region across parts of Florida and some states up to the north as well. And that's going to be partially influenced by a weak southeast ridge. Here's the interesting part, snowfall. And you can see here, if we go from west to east here and kind of zoom in here, once again, areas are not shaded. That's your normal. 100% is normal. And we got a couple areas of 75%. We got one area that includes parts of California, Nevada, your desert regions of southeastern Oregon, far southwestern Idaho. That includes parts of Utah, Arizona, and even the parts of Colorado in New Mexico. So, if you want to try to figure out, the real numbers here, like say for example, if you get your calculator out, if your average snowfall is like 15 inches of snow. So if I would have put 15 inches of snow and times that by 75%, that could be how much snow you could see, which would be about 11 inches of snow. Now, I can't really give you guys the exact number. You have to put that in about a 5 to 10 inch range to kind of give you guys a little better idea for how much snow you could possibly see. And that kind of works for every other number out there as well. So that's kind of how you kind of put in math. For average snowfall, you kind of have to look that for yourself. But anyway, continuing on, we do have an area of slightly above average snowfall, 125% for parts of the Northern Rockies. That includes parts of Wyoming, Montana, and portions of the Dakotas. We'll have a pretty active polar jet stream over those areas, which with some of those storm systems, we could see a lot of Alberta Clipper systems, and some of those could bring winter storm-like conditions. Even getting towards the spring time frame here, I think we could see some slightly bigger winter storms up there as well. It's a little bit far out, fetched out there, but the potential is there that we can see that. We have another area, 75%, that includes parts of Kansas, Nebraska, Iowa. It really includes a decent chunk in the Midwest overall, and that's going to be partially due to the drought conditions, and also it's not a very favorable storm track either for decent winter storms up there. So I think snowfall overall is going to be slightly below average over some of those areas. Let's get into the most interesting part, the eastern U.S. We actually got an area of 150% chance, or consider that above normal. And that includes anywhere from parts of Arkansas, Mississippi, even down to parts of Alabama, for the Tennessee Valley, the Ohio Valley, even up into parts of the interior Northeast. Now, we've seen this last winter. You cannot underestimate the South when it comes to snow. The averages for snow is very low. If your average snowfall is 4 inches, and you get one winter storm that brings you 8 inches of snow, you already doubled your average, which would be 200%. So don't be surprised that in some of these areas here, across parts of the deep south here, which I'll put a little red circle in here, that some of these areas here could underperform the winter forecast. But then again, this is a little bit more of a conservative approach. Not saying an 8-inch winter storm is going to happen in these areas here, but it's definitely possible. But it also kind of gives you an example. You know, it doesn't take much snow to get you above average in some of these regions here. The Northeast there, it's definitely a different story. Averages of snowfall up in the parts of the Northeast is very high. Now let me also put it in this way here. Like up in Maine, for example, snowfall up there is average. Don't make you think that this 150%, like down in parts of Tennessee, make you think that Tennessee is going to see more snow than Maine. That's not going to happen. Maine snowfall averages are way up there compared to Tennessee. So keep that in mind as well. But it also kind of gives you an idea of where a lot of the snow could also fall as well. You also notice that 125% does cover most of Michigan, and that's going to be partially due to the lake effect snow uh, as well. And also along the East Coast, I think we are going to be closer to average, and I think those well above normal sea surface temperatures, especially just off the East Coast, can really affect these snowfall anomalies as well. I think the greatest chances for quite a bit of snow will be more focused in the interior Northeast this upcoming winter. Alright, let's check out the overall forecast or the bold prediction. I had a little fun with this, and you can see how the wording is quite different, but I'll explain in a little bit more detail as we kind of get through here. So let's go from west to east. So in this yellow shade, pretty much the northwest to northern California. No consistency. What in the world does that mean? Well, what that means is that the pattern's not going to be very consistent, which when you think about it, anywhere, the pattern's not very consistent for a 3-month period. It doesn't really happen that way. It's not how it works. But if I were to put it in this way here, a couple of weeks, it might be nice, be warm and dry, which we're kind of experiencing that right now. In other setups, it may turn cold and stormy. And I can see a lot of this back and forth happen quite a bit in the Northwest throughout the winter. And that's also the reason why I put that warning in there. It's just that there's not much consistency with the pattern there. There's just going to be lots of big ups and downs in the Northwest. But I think by the end of the winter here, I think a lot of you guys, some of you guys could definitely relate to some of these wording here. Alright, in the orange shade, warm but boring. It may not be that bad to get some warmer than normal temperatures, depending on what type of person you are. But it's also not going to be a whole lot of precipitation, which obviously some of these areas here don't get a whole lot of precipitation. I mean, some of these are desert-like areas. But really, if you don't have a whole lot of precipitation, weather overall can be boring for some folks out there. So, I don't think this upcoming winter is going to be a big winter for a lot of these areas here in the orange. So, maybe better luck next winter. Areas in dark blue, lots of fun. If you're a big snow fan or you like skiing, I think this is going to be a good winter for it. With an active polar jet stream going over some of these areas, which can bring along a decent amount of snow, it can certainly lead to some good skiing on those rocky mountains. And even for areas over the parts of Dakotas, if you like snow, I think this could definitely be a good winter. But also keep in mind it's going to break a decent amount of cold weather with it, and also a decent amount of wind in certain setups as well. So overall, in Aries Dark Blue, I think you guys are going to have quite a bit of fun. Aries in the brown cover. Rain, please. Unfortunately, I think things are still going to continue to stay dry. I mean, with the drought conditions, that's going to kill snow potential, and it can also help decrease um, moisture content just a little bit. And it's going to be hard to get a decent amount of moisture with some of these saps here. So unfortunately, you guys probably won't see a whole lot of rain. That does not necessarily mean you won't see any precipitation throughout the entire winter. You'll see some, but compared to average, it definitely be below average. So overall, it generally be dry. Areas in the purple, depressing. Yeah, temperatures might be very cold up there, but how are you going to get the snow? And I think we're going to see a lack of snow for a decent amount of these areas here, which back on the snowfall forecast, some of these areas compared to average could be about 75%. That's slightly below average. And I really don't see a very favorable track for big winter storms for a lot of these areas here. You probably have to wait for that really until really towards the end of winter, where February looks to be trending maybe a little bit warmer, which could lead to a southeast ridge, but that could also help increase winter storm chances for parts of the Midwest. So it may be very cold, but you may not see a whole lot of snow. So it kind of gives more of a depressing look for parts of the Midwest. It could be very cold at times as well. Some serious Arctic air could be involved. Now, areas in the pink here across parts of the several plains, south, even up into the mid-Atlantic. Tired of wintry mix events, which I'm sure I know up here in Kentucky, we get wintry mix events a lot, and as forecasters, those type of events are very tough to forecast. But for people overall, with wintry mix events, you could get a mix of sleet, freezing rain, and sometimes snow. And unfortunately, with some of these setups here that could set up over some of these areas in here, I think there's going to be a decent amount of wintry mix events. That could either be in the form of sleet or even worse, freezing rain. Not saying there's going to be an ice storm in these areas here, but I think there's going to be a decent amount of wintry mix events. And I think it could definitely get pretty annoying as well. So that's what that pink area means. In the red, disappointing. If anybody that lives in parts of the Carolinas, Georgia, Alabama, if you're expecting a lot of snow, I think it's going to be a pretty disappointing winter overall. However, I will mention that there might be some potential for some severe weather in some of these areas as well. Which I know there's one guy in particular in South Carolina. He rather would have snow than severe weather. Well, he might just get severe weather instead of snow. So it could be a disappointing winter for some of those folks out there overall. Areas in hot pink across parts of Michigan or the Great Lakes in general, too much snow. And we're already experiencing that off of Lake Ontario in Lake Erie. Up in parts of Buffalo, it's already got about 5 feet of snow already at the time of making this video. So there's definitely going to be certain setups, some serious lake effect snow setups that could lead just, in general, way too much snow. And definitely, I would believe lake effect snow overall is going to be above normal this upcoming winter. Areas in the white, a winter to remember. I think there's definitely some potential that this winter here could be big in some of these areas here. Either if it's going to be historic cold or some big winter storms. So I think it's definitely possible that we could certainly see some big winter storms in some of these regions here. Can I roll out a blizzard? I can't tell you exactly where a blizzard would be. Maybe not so much in the Ozarks. It might be a little bit different story out there, but at least for the Ohio Valley, the parts northeast, might need to watch out for that potential. So that'd be something interesting to watch to see how that plays out. In the last area, in the light green, for parts of New England states, fun days and sad days. Some of those fun days will be where a low pressure system tracks at a pretty good spot here just off the East Coast, bringing in heavy snow and bringing a lot of snow overall. Some of those sad days will be that lows will be too far inland and you might just get a lot of rain instead of a lot of snow. And I think that's going to be a pretty common thing for a lot of these areas here, especially if those well above normal sea surface temperature anomalies that could help push the storm track a little bit farther inland, but it can also help bring in a decent amount of warm air further inland as well. But also still cannot rule out the potential for storm systems to roll along just along in the coastline, and that could still bring some pretty good snows up into some of those areas as well. So overall, I think some of us folks by the end of winter can at least relate to some of these things here that I put in here as well. Would it be correct? Time will tell on that. But anyways, guys, this is all good for you guys today. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you guys like this video, hit that like button. If you like my channel, hit that subscribe button. Hit the bell notifications so you never miss an upload. If you guys have questions about this, put a comment section down below. I heard you guys questions. I'll see you guys in the next video. Goodbye and have a good day.